Hi, guys. Welcome back to Learn Too Late. We are so excited. We have an incredible guest for you today. Sadia Zapp, she is the managing director of communications at the Breast Cancer Research Foundation. And she is someone that is very, very important to me and has really introduced me to a new world of breast cancer research. And I am just so inspired by your story. And I can't wait for our listeners to hear a little bit about you. So you have spent your days since I think about 2015 working at BCRF, but there was a moment when you went from working in breast cancer to living it. And before we get into your diagnosis, I would love to hear a little bit about your role at BCRF and when you first thought something might be wrong.
Sure. So, like you said, I've been working at BCRF for 11 years now, which is wild to say, but I have been in communications working as part of the communications team. And 7 years into my job, I realized that something feels wrong, and thankfully, actually, because of my job, I knew to pay attention. I knew what signs to look out for, and I knew what to do. So, on that front, I'm just so grateful that I had the education that I needed at the moment that I needed it. Because if I didn't know what to look out for, if I wasn't aware of what to do, then can't imagine how much farther along, how much more advanced it would have been. But the way I found out was that my husband and I just moved in to a new house. We were still unpacking boxes. And one night, it's summertime. It was 1 month after we moved in. So I'm like sweaty and hot after a day of unpacking boxes. And I roll over and I feel this weird lump in my left breast. And I say this because I wasn't doing self exams. I wasn't really good. Despite working at BCRF, I wasn't really good at doing self exams because every time I raised my risk factors to doctors, when I took online risk assessments because I knew to do that, working at BCRF, I was never flagged as high risk. I was flagged as average risk. So I wasn't terribly worried about a future about being diagnosed with breast cancer. Certainly not at that age. At the time, I was 36. But back to not doing my self exams, part of it was just no thinking, I don't really need to worry about it. Find my own lump. I keep track of it for a month. Then I go into the doctor who doesn't know me because it's a brand new town, brand new doctor. At that point, she also felt something in my lymph nodes, so like in my armpit. And then she said, you know what? Now let's just get this imaged because we're feeling two things. Of course, I go in to see the radiologist, and that radiologist immediately knew she was looking at cancer. So when I went in to get a mammogram and ultrasound, she didn't wait for a bite. She didn't mince words. She was very kind. She held my hand and had me sit down and said, I just want you to be prepared because you're definitely going to need a biopsy, but I want you to know that this is cancer, that there's a lot going on. I'm very certain it's cancer. So, of course, again, I work at BCRF. I could not believe my ears. I know how common breast cancer is. I know how many women are diagnosed with it every year. It wouldn't be me, right? And I think also some part of you thinks I'm racking up some good karma points. Hopefully it doesn't happen to me, right? Like you think
Right,
you're doing
right.
all the right things, you're exercising, my diet was, as good as I could make it at the time. And I was as healthy as I could possibly be. I was really into health and wellness and all of that. Of course, being in my field of work, an occupational hazard is paranoia. But regardless, I lived a generally healthy life. So still, you could have knocked me over with a feather. The shock was, I think probably worse because I really didn't think I had anything to fear.
Right.
Was
Yeah, that
my
was my first thought. And, really going through your story. And I've heard your story and heard you be interviewed, 100 times. And my thought was, you know, I'm not living the same story, not being a cancer patient, but when you spend all of your days talking about something that's so deeply intimate to you. I'm sitting here every day talking about the death of my mother, undergoing a preventative surgery. I can't imagine what it's like to work and almost relive the most
Mhm.
traumatic experience of your life every day. What is that like for you? And has that changed over time?
Has definitely changed over time. It's funny, there are women who will reach out to me and say, like, breast cancer patients who say, oh, I really want to make a difference for the breast cancer community. I think that's one thing you find is that once you've been diagnosed, everybody wants to help. Like, after you've been diagnosed, I've never met another patient who hasn't wanted to do something to help the community. And then when they come to me and say, how do I get a job in your field at BCR? I always say to them, like, hang on, you have to really think about it. Like, I know it's great and I still love what I do and I'm still doing it, but it doesn't come without consequence. It doesn't come without that exactly what you just said, which is that you're living your worst fears over and over again. And not only that, but in my specific role, part of my job is to mine what we don't know so that I can explain it to people to help garner giving, right? And donations. And part of that is to really focus on the urgency and like the number of deaths, the number of how risky it is, how hard it is for younger patients. So not only am I talking about just my own diagnosis, which that part of it is actually quite cathartic, talking about my experience, I've learned to turn it into a catharsis, but mining all of the information, all of the research to specifically hone in on the things we don't know, that's terrifying. That's really terrifying. So I had to learn how to instead reframe a lot of what I was talking about mentally and a lot of the things that I was learning to focus on what we do know and just again all of the advances that we have made, but it's been for sure an evolution, but also a learning for me to figure out how do I cope with the things that I have to do for work, given my own personal experience and emotional trauma from what happened to me. So, yes, I would say it's not easy, but it's worth it. At the end of the day, I certainly still find it incredibly fulfilling, incredibly meaningful. And I get to meet people like you. I mean, we met because of this job, and I wouldn't have met you without it. And so, to me, at the end of the day, I think that all is what makes it really worth it.
What was that time like, if you feel comfortable talking about it, after being diagnosed and going back to work? What was it like to talk to coworkers, your boss? I mean, it, it's almost like I feel like it's almost worse when everybody knows the statistics. They know the risk factors, they know the language around it, and having it become personal. What was it like walking back into a situation like that?
Well, again, there's two sides of the coin. So on one hand, it was like I knew way too much. Like I knew way too
Right.
much. And, like that was not good. But on the other hand, like if there's anywhere you want to work when you're diagnosed with breast cancer, it's like BCRF, you couldn't get anywhere that's more understanding and more willing to make sure that you're feeling emotionally, physically all okay. Everyone always wanted to make sure I was okay. And I happened to have just a fantastic boss and just a great team. Now, I didn't have the luxury of not telling people. I didn't have the luxury of sort of using work as an escape and potentially avoiding talking about my diagnosis. I had to tell people because part of my job, again, was to relentlessly talk about breast cancer. And I couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it. So I had to tell people so that I could tell them, please don't send me that story. Please don't send me this piece of information because I don't want to know it. I cannot know it right now. There would be phone calls. I was once on a phone call and I was so glad that I had told my boss at the time because I was on a phone call with external people and one of the people on the call said, "Oh, and my um, niece who was 35, like my age at the time, right? She was 35 and she died last week and she had two kids." I immediately hung up the phone. This was like right after like right after. And of course, these people don't know. They don't know. They're external people. I immediately like on a Zoom, camera drops. I drop off the call. Thank God my boss stayed on it. She covered. She changed the subject, started talking about something else. So I had allies, and I made allies at work in terms of people who, a, when in the early days were the very important people that really needed to know because they worked with me on a daily basis, my team, and then broader, really ultimately it ended up being everyone at BCRF because I had to tell people like don't send me X, Y, and Z. But I had a tremendous support system at work, but I couldn't avoid telling people about my diagnosis. So I had to do it. And I just had to draw boundaries, like really hard lines in the sand about what I would and wouldn't do, and what I would and wouldn't read, wouldn't review or approve. Like, so we developed a great system of like almost like I was still working, but a triage for who else was on first for things that normally would have been me. So I think that is really what saved me in those early days. And since then, I have certainly developed like I call it like alligator skin. Like my skin is so thick. It is so thick now, which is great, but it's still permeable. It's not steel, but nonetheless, it's definitely gotten a lot thicker.
Triage, I think, is a really great word to use for that. And I mean, I'm really grateful that you had it because I can't even imagine what the first couple days, weeks, years even must be like because your job is literally talking about this all day, every day in a very raw, emotional way that tugs on the heartstrings of your audience. I mean, that's the whole point. You know, we want to raise money, we want to educate people on the realities, and you're living that reality. So I would love to hear about when you were first diagnosed because you have a family history of breast cancer, but it's not a first line family member. So maybe you could inform the audience members who might not know what that means and why it was almost a hindrance to you in being able to get screened early.
So, my mother's sister, my aunt, was diagnosed with breast cancer at the age of 25. This was about um, 25 years ago now. And it's actually why sought out a job in breast cancer because her experience, I was 10 years old at that time. And I remembered just her wig. Like for some reason, and I come from like Bengal, like we're Bengali, my family, and we don't talk about health. Back then, we do now, but back then when I was 10, no one talked about her diet. We didn't use the word using the word breast never would have happened. We don't talk about female body parts. So culturally, we didn't talk about her diagnosis. Nonetheless, it stayed with me. And it's what pushed me to work for a breast cancer organization because it made such an impact on me and remembering her as a young woman. Regardless, so I knew to flag, my mom's sister had it. Um, this is the age that I got my period. This is the age that I was when I had my first baby, like all of my risk factors in this way. And nonetheless, I was still never flagged as high risk. Even though I wanted to begin screening earlier, I wanted to begin at the age of 35 since she was diagnosed at 25. But she's my mom's sister. She's not my mother. And because she was a second degree relative, not a first degree relative, they never took it into clinical decision making. They just didn't. And to be honest, to be fair for the doctors, I mean, part of me feels like I should have known better because of my job at BCR. Like I should have known better. So I have to fight my way out of that rabbit hole that I go down in my head. But the fact is, when I take these tests, when I take these online tests, these Tyrocusic, etc., that everyone should take no matter what, because it's still for those that it does catch, it's great. But plenty of people like me will fall through those cracks because it did not flag me. It elevated my risk a little bit, but not enough to say like you should begin screening earlier, or it didn't do it enough to begin screening earlier. So I it was never taken seriously. And I think it just depends sometimes on your care team. And in this day and age, actually, now we do know that, especially if you have family members, even second degree relatives, but specifically if they're diagnosed young, diagnosed before the age of 50, that's actually an alarm bell. So I have a lot of regrets, and I wish I would have pushed more about it. But yeah, my family history never counted, never really counted in a meaningful way to change what my trajectory was. But I'm hoping, and there's a lot we can talk about more, but there's more stuff coming down the pike in terms of technology to help, and there's better risk assessments that are coming down the pike, but we can talk about that.
I just feel like you can't beat yourself up about that because you almost have to get into the mindset of this could happen to me to be
Mhm.
able to push back in those sort of scenarios. Even if you're an expert, even if you work in this, it's a vulnerable mental place to get into of, hey, this could happen to me. Let me push, push, push to get this. And that's scary. And you don't want to feel that way. And you don't want to have the consideration in your mind I could have cancer. So, of course, you're comforted by the fact that the risk assessment said that I'm not high risk. The doctors are saying that I'm not high risk. Then everything must be okay. And living in that comfort, I think, is a very real, human condition to all of it, but does serve as a cautionary tale for if you feel strongly about it to push back. And you see it even with people who do fall into this very high risk category. So my mom was diagnosed at 27. Her mom had been diagnosed with breast cancer really early. She'd lost almost every woman in her family to breast cancer. And the doctors just said, well, you're too young to have breast cancer. You're just drinking too much coffee. Come back and see us in 6 months. And, by the time she got back, the tumor was the size of a golf ball. Like they had to remove her breast all the way down to the chest wall. She was never able to reconstruct that side. Like I knew her my entire life with one breast. And I can't imagine what that is like I mean, I had a mastectomy, but I had a beautiful reconstruction. I'm one of those very, very lucky people. And it still was hard. So I can't imagine having a cancer diagnosis, worrying that you're going to die, having your very intimate part of your body removed and never be able to reconstruct it. I mean, you just don't think that it could be you. And so I don't think that it's your responsibility as a patient to have to be your own best advocate. Of course, it's great, but you also deserve to have people in your team who say, oh, well, 25 is pretty early. And that's your mom's sister. Like that you're really working in the same gene pool there. So, is there anything else that you
Like my mom was flagged as high. It like automatically siblings become put into a high risk category. So that always never made sense to me. Whereas my mom is high risk, but I'm not high risk. Anyway, but you're absolutely right. Like I do think mean, like most people, I have a lot more grace for others than I
right?
do for myself. So I totally would tell somebody the same. Like, how would you know? Your doctor says you're okay. You have to trust your doctor at some point. But yes, I have a much harder time forgiving myself for not putting my foot down and saying like absolutely not. I should be getting screened at 35, but I mean you're right. You're right. And it's those things that you still have there's still a lot of self-talk that needs to happen.
And I think if you also come from a culture and a background where the conversation, just didn't really happen, even if you're working in it, there is still some internal like background that you have of like, okay, well, we can talk about it with other people, but maybe not for me. Or, speaking with your mom, speaking with your family members. And, I had read when you talked about like the wig thing, and it's so interesting. I feel like that's such a strong visual for so many people in this community of like this childhood memory. And that was how I found out about my mom's breast cancer. I found a wig catalog at her office and I said, but I thought you had beat cancer. Why do you have this wig catalog? And she took this big breath. And like, I remember this conversation like so vividly. And she had to tell me I'm 12 years old at the time, like, okay, I have breast cancer. And, really positively, I'm going to beat it. But at the time, she had a stage 3 breast cancer. It turned into metastatic breast cancer. And I mean, I think when you go through a history like that, even if it's not your mother, but it's your aunt, this person that's very, very close to you, I think that also creates a little bit of a hindrance and makes you want to feel like, I hope it's not me. And like you're almost putting your hand in front of your face and like the arm stretched out and creating distance from this thing that could be a reality for you. Do you think it's changed how you do your job now that you're on the other side of it?
Yes, certainly. And actually, absolutely. I say also one of the things I say all the time is, I thought I knew everything before until I was diagnosed and realized how much I don't know or didn't know. But a lot of that has to do with the aftermath and just really not understanding that there is an aftermath. The fact that the fear never goes away once you're diagnosed. One of the reasons why prevention is so important is because once you've been diagnosed, even though we're so good at treating breast cancer, you will live with that fear of the other shoe dropping for the rest of your life. And so preventing that, like, there's so many things where sometimes I'm like, you know what? I'm grateful to cancer for a lot of things. There's so many things I'm grateful for where I've changed my perception, my viewpoint. There's just a lot of silver linings for me. But I would still give all of that up if I didn't have to live with that fear for the rest of my life. So that's a little complex. That's what I have like a complicated relationship in thinking about that and thinking about cancer because I am grateful to it in some weird way for certain things. But certainly that I didn't understand. I didn't understand the aftermath. And so I think I have a lot more compassion for, just have a whole new level of compassion for patients. But, it just actually reminded me of just recently, I'll share this story that I haven't talked about yet, but I recently found another lump in my left breast, which was not my breast cancer breast, but I found another lump. And if this was the old Sadia, the first Sadia when I first found my lump, I would have like been in a outer space in a black hole, right? Like I would have gone
Mhm.
nuts, right? But this time around, I was able to keep my feet on the ground, and there's a lot of reasons why, but one of them is probably my medication, my anxiety meds are probably a big part of that. But also, I realized I was thinking about like when this happened, I found this new lump, got in touch with my surgeon, had imaging done. After imaging, they recommended a biopsy. So all of that, though, each one of those steps required waiting. I had to wait for my surgeon's appointment, had to wait to get the imaging. After imaging, had to wait for my biopsy appointment. All of that is just a slow form of torture, right? For most patients. But I had to talk myself back, and I think what let me wait and what let me endure that time was that I realized like, wow, I've gotten better at this. Like this is an evolution. I've gotten better at this. I was still working. I'm still talking about breast cancer. I didn't tell really anyone at work, but it let me. Although again, I did tell someone who I thought could help me in case I needed to like drop from that phone call, right? Like drop in case
Yeah.
I needed to have an SOS. But regardless, I kept myself together in a way I definitely didn't do the first time around. So I'm very proud of myself for that. But also, um, I think a lot of it has to do with recognizing that, when you're diagnosed, it's this like bombshell moment in your life. And so it's divided into two, a before and an after. And I realized while I'm waiting for this diagnosis that I'm in the before period right now, potentially. Like this is potentially my before times. So enjoy it. Let me enjoy it. I don't know what's going to come later. I might as well just be in my before times, be willfully ignorant of what's coming because there's plenty of time to worry in the after. There's plenty of time to
Yeah.
worry in the after times. So let me just enjoy my before times right now, do homework with my kid, do bedtime with him, and just enjoy it and not ruin it with fear and worry because there's going to be plenty of time for that later. And that's what I learned from my first time is like worrying in the before times, you're still going to be worrying later. So why ruin this moment with something that's just out of your control? Um, so to me, actually, that was a lot of what we were talking about earlier is like how what's it like working in this space? For sure, it I learned just from this biopsy experience, which turned out to be negative. Just I realize I'm saying this later, but
We're
hopefully you'll.
cheering.
Um, it turned out to be negative, but that whole time frame, that whole period was exercise in growth for me, for sure.
This it's a really beautiful way to think about things, and I think hard to live it. And it's interesting you say that because the first, big project that we had worked on together was with the Knitwell group and that shoot. And I remember you had asked us to write these quotes down. And I always remembered this, kind of words of wisdom from my grandfather, where he said, "There's nothing to worry about until there's something to worry about, and no ounce of worry adds a second to your life." And anytime I'm in that panic filled moment, no matter what it is, I try to remind myself of it. I don't know if I always live it the way that I would like to, but you're you're completely right that, why waste those beautiful moments before you could potentially hear this life-changing news, already catastrophizing
Mhm.
what could be. And
Exactly.
yeah, if you can get yourself into that mind frame, whether or not it's the right milligram of something, meditation, mindfulness, any way you get there, I think that's a really wonderful thing to take with you through your life, because it's so easy to really waste your life worrying about what could be, or the fear of what could be. Um, what do you think helped you get to that point?
Lexapro for sure, for sure. Some figuring that out 100%. I and you
Hey,
know,
store-bought calm is also okay.
yes, exactly. Truly, like whatever it is that you need, and I think so many of us do, we kind of have a sense of what will work for us. But I for sure think it was my first experience for me. Like I think knowing that, listen, there's a before and after, and that like I actually should have just spent that before time enjoying it, enjoying not knowing that I'm about to be living in a crater. So instead, like live in this beautiful home before it's thrown, sideways. And yeah, I think for me, I don't know that I could have done it before. Like before before my first experience, I don't know. Because sometimes you have to learn the hard way, and I learned the hard way, but thankfully I was able to cope with it this time around. So for me, for sure, it's like that, you know, adding that medication that I need, but it's what you said is like repeating it to yourself, repeating it for sure. I'm like also really into manifesting now, so I decided like this is what I'm into. I'm gonna visualize the outcome, and I'm gonna live in that outcome, and I like that a lot for me.
We talk about that a lot on the podcast, about like speaking things into existence. And I feel like you like create lucky girl syndrome for yourself. And it's not just being somebody that walks through the world with luck and has good things happen, but you talk about it out loud, you speak it out loud, wrap your mind around positivity and goodness. And my mom always talked about that. She said, "I cured my breast cancer the first time through the power of positive thinking." And she was a marathon runner. And I remember reading in her journal, she said when she was first diagnosed, she continued to go for runs. And at first it was just left, right, don't die, don't die.
Hmm.
And then her mindset just continued to, she said it was strengthening. Like she thought through every aspect of her body, like she imagined her body fighting off this cancer. And, she was 20 years in remission from that. And she's like, she really deeply and profoundly believed that through her power of positive thinking, she was able to come out on the other side. And I believe it to be true. I feel it in every aspect of my life. When I want something big, I talk about it, I put it out there, I visualize it, and I think our minds are more powerful than we think. Um, was there was there ever a time, and I always think about this, not that like a breakup is anywhere close to having a cancer diagnosis, but for some people they need to cold turkey from everything. So like you get divorced, you sell the house, you burn the clothes that you wore on the date with a guy. You know, you do all the things that just get rid of those ancillary outside triggers. And I feel like having cancer is a trauma that there's so many things you can't just get rid of it
Mhm.
from. Like how did you cope with that? Like coming back to the same home, being in the same job, doing the same things that you did before you were diagnosed?
That is such a profound question because I literally have chemo clothes that it's just stuffed in a box that I can't even get myself to donate it because I don't even want to look at those clothes like from what I was wearing when I'd go into chemo because there's some that I
Yeah.
there's a specific outfit that I wore I think couple times and now just looking at it I'm like I want to burn it. But that's such a good question. Like how do I do that? It's funny. At my house, I think we're about to undergo a renovation in the next year, like a few months, hopefully. But part of that is because I was diagnosed a month after I moved in. So this house, my diagnosis, I just recently, this is now, I was diagnosed 4 years ago. I finished active treatment about 3 years ago. Like my last surgery was 2 years ago, something like that. I feel like I'm just now waking up and looking at my house like, oh my God, I live here and fine. And I'm realizing
Mm,
part of the drive to make these changes is also because I need to look at a new place. So part of me is like, I need it done because this is an old house. We moved in, we didn't make any of the changes we promised ourselves we would because we got sidetracked, of course, with my diagnosis. But I am even you asking me this question is making me realize like I think part of what's driving me and pushing for these changes is probably that. Is probably a lot to do with not wanting to walk into the same place that I did or the same couch that I was laying on and all of that kind of stuff. So that is really hard. And my work still tough, but I think for me it's leaning into the pros and the pros so far outweigh the cons that's what lets me still show up to that office and that job and all of that kind of stuff. So, and luckily I did get a new office space. So like I do have
thank
like a
God.
visual, I know, like I got really lucky
Yeah.
that way because I don't have the associations that I would with the other office that I was in. But that's such a good question. But actually, Alan, I have one for you. Because when you were talking, it occurred to me that as someone who lost their mom, one of my biggest fears is that my son will lose his. What do you wish your mom would have done for you now, like as a grown up? Like, what parts of her have you kept, and what parts of her do you wish you could still have? Because I'm always wondering, like, should I be?
Yeah.
I write letters to my son. Like, what else could I be doing for him?
Yeah. That's a great question. It's made me cry, but I'm in this chapter of my life where vulnerability is good. And I think becoming a mother I'm re-mourning everything. Um, I'm mourning for her because I know what it's like now to be a mom and to look at my little girls and realize, oh my God, my 5-year-old, like, what if I only had 11 more years with her? What if I had to tell her that I had cancer and I was going to die? Um, I mourn for myself as a little girl, and I think about all of the things I wish I had and um, being able to talk to her, counsel with her, ask for advice. It's little things that almost seem kind of superficial of like, I just wish I had someone that like deeply and profoundly cared about the minutia of my life. You know, like your mom is really the only person that you pick up the phone and talk to about, you changed your nail color that day and oh, I did this and not really having that kind of person. And of course you can have a great supportive spouse or, maybe you have a great relationship with your dad, but a mom is something different. I have my mom's journals
Mm.
and some of them are like profoundly sad and I can only work through so much of it at a time, but it gave me a glimpse of her in a way that I couldn't process as a young kid. My mom died when I was 16. And so being able to see her as a person and not just kind of this like entity or this caretaker, I wish that I had had You see these companies now that do videos of people who are maybe end of life, and they're talking through different, ways. And I have one last letter from my mom. It's a final thing, kind of that she wrote to me, and it's only 4 pages. And I talk about this quite a bit because she, finding this letter, it wasn't this love letter to me. It was this primer for life, walking me through everything that she could think of at the time, counseling me on, okay, what's the right type of man to marry? What type of career she thought I'd be in, where I'd go to college, how to make friends, just really all of these very practical things. And my God, this has been such an incredible thing for me to have through my life. And it feels like this never-ending fountain where when I have a trouble in my life, I go back and I read this letter that I've read 1,000 times now, and somehow something new pops up, in this text. But I think you also have to look at it with a positive spin of some of the greatest things that have ever happened to me have come because my mom died. And people that I met and things that I've been able to experience and, my career, my life is directly related to me losing my mom. And I'm very grateful for all of those things. And I wonder all the time if I would be living the same life, if I would have the same amount of happiness and contentment in what I get to do every day if I hadn't lost her. And I try to
Mm-hmm.
look at that as a gift,
Mm-hmm.
something that she's imparted with me. And I always feel like I'm not the type of person that feels like I see my mom all the time or like I have signs or she's always there, but I always feel some sort of guiding influence in my life. And I also think, and I'm rambling on now, that there's something special about being able to have made all my own choices by myself. Like my life is curated by me, and it wasn't what my mom wanted for me. It's not what family members wanted for me or anybody else. I made all of those choices. And I don't know if that life again would have been the same would she have been
Mm-hmm.
here. Would I like cut my left arm off to have one more conversation with her? Absolutely. But I try to just be grateful for the time that she was here. And I feel like I'm still pouring from the cup of love that she gave me. And there are people who will never experience what it's like to have that kind of mother's love. And I'm so profoundly sad for people like that because I only had 16 years with my mom, but I know what true love is.
Mm-hmm.
And I continue to pull from that. And I mean, it's been over 20 years and I feel her in every aspect of my life. So I know that's how you are with your son, and you're imparting that kind of love and wisdom and virtue in him. And no matter what happens, and, you know, we don't claim the bad things, we only claim the positive things, he will feel your love and live your love for the rest of his life. And nobody can take that away.
It makes me so happy actually as a mom to hear, and I know you know this because you're a mom, but it makes me so happy as a mom to hear how you talk about your mom is like what I just it's all I wish for. It's all I wish for as a mom is that like my kid one day talks about me this way, whether he has me or not. And hopefully, God willing, I'm with him. But for whatever reason, if I'm not, that he has that to hold on to. So it's just that's why I asked you that question because I'm always looking for how do I make sure that he talks
But he
about me like.
will. He will. And it's not any specific thing that you do, and I look for the same thing. I always trying to find some tangible way that I can prove to my children that I love them, or if something happens to me, they'll have this thing, and I'm like obsessed with scrapbooking or like leaving them journals or giving them notes. And I realize like that's not it. It's being present for your children. It's imparting love. It's telling them how much you love them. I think the number one thing for me is like the sense of personal efficacy that my mom instilled in me that I could do and be anything I wanted to in life. And whether it's delusional or not, like I truly down to my core believe that I could be an astronaut or the president of the United States or whatever I want if I just worked hard enough, if I just wanted it enough, because she believed in me. And we have this new sort of culture of like, well, don't tell your children that they're beautiful. Like, don't tell them the things that they do are great. Like, no, like, tell your kids that they're amazing and beautiful and like let the world beat them up. Let the world tell them that they can't accomplish things. Like your mom is for delusional love. And I still feel that delusional love today. And even when like the world beat me down, like I, felt alone, I always had like my mom's voice in the back of my head. They don't get you yet, but they will.
Mm.
And that has served as a sense of motivation for me.
That's good. That makes me feel better because I'm definitely that mom that's like, "You're amazing, honey." Like,
You gotta Kris Jenner it. Like, you're doing amazing, sweetie. Like that's the way to mother. And like I will die on this hill. And I mean, you just have everyone else for the rest of your life being critical. Mom is supposed to blindly and obsessively love everything you do. And that's not to say that you can't set firm boundaries and be critical of certain things or reprimand bad behavior, but just loving them and making them feel like they're great because they're probably not going to get that many places.
mm. And how simple is that, right? It's so simple. For kids, it's
It's so
so
simple.
simple.
And it's free. We spend so much time wanting to give our kids this magical life of opportunity and the best school and make sure they're in music class and dance class and all the things to set them up for success in life. And if I really had to think about it, like what was the key to most happiness, contentment, and success in my life, it's like my mom's delusional love of me.
He's got it then.
So yeah, it's easy to always like try to plan for the future, but you're doing exactly what you need to be doing is like living in the now. And that was one of my questions I wanted to ask of, being a mother while you were diagnosed. Having cancer, you should be able to just be selfish and like think about yourself and think about your treatment and go through it without having to consider anyone else's feelings or existence, really. And that just wasn't your reality. Like, what kind of advice would you give to another mom who might be in the same scenario that you were?
Well, number one, I feel like for moms, my worst fear was, am I going to traumatize my kid for life? Is this going to just ruin them? And I was recently talking to someone, or I think I posted something, and I was like, they're going to be fine. Like, they're going to be totally fine because, A, kids, this wide, and I don't just mean like one or two, I mean, they're built to bounce back, right? They have to survive. And because of that, they're capable of understanding so much. So my son was 4. And so the one number one thing I tell people is like they will be okay. So number one, tell yourself that they will be okay. So release that guilt from yourself. And number two, and this is coming from someone who's sort of like on the other side where I'm done with active treatment, I'm done with the visual trauma that he had to experience. But two, I talked to him a lot. I talked him through every step from when I'm going into chemo. I was gonna lose my hair. Couldn't do cold cap, or I didn't do cold capping because I just didn't. And I talked him through when I cut my hair really short, when it was going bald, and he in a way that he could understand. So whatever was important to him. So talk to your kid. You know your kid best. What's the most understandable metaphor that they will that they'll get? So for my kid, that happened to be my medicine inside of my body. Like I had a disease. Number one, I made sure he understood it's not contagious. It's just that our body parts are like machines, and one of the little machines just stopped working properly. So I need medicine in my body, and the medicine inside my body will get supercharged because my hair is so special. Like my hair is so powerful. As if it can just use my hair, it'll work really extra hard.
I love this.
He got that. He was like, "Oh, it's gonna get supercharged. I get it." So he completely got that. I was bald, completely bald, not one stitch of hair on my body, and every morning, like, he did not flinch. Now, there are some things that I think are coming out a little bit now, but at the time when he was 4, where he would wake me up every single morning, cradle my face, and tell me I was beautiful. Like this 4-year-old
Ugh.
knew, and just every morning, "Mommy, you're so beautiful," to my bald head. Surgery, he's a boy. Okay, they like to bounce on your head. Okay, they're not gentle creatures. So but he was so gentle. He was so gentle post surgery. He knew mommy's slowing down. Like I have boo-boos. I have, he could see my bandages. I had drain. I'm not hiding well, he still calls my blood bags. Like I had my
Oh
drains
my
out.
God.
He's like, your blood, remember your blood bag? But he thought they were so cool. So I was like, yeah, this is so cool. This is so cool. So I played into the things that he played into, and it was, he just was fantastic. Radiation. Told him I was going I have an appointment every single day. Every day he'd come home from school. How was your appointment today, mommy? So I think talking him through
What a
it,
good kid.
he was so sweet, so sweet, and he was and is, and like I now, so I'll give one example. I'm realizing now, because it doesn't just end there, right? So there are things that happen that you realize, oh, they do keep with them. So we're watching a television show, and there's a woman, we're watching Great British Baking Show, and there's a contestant who's bald, and he really reacted to her right away. He's like, oh, I don't like her. I don't want her. I don't want to see her. And I was like,
Mm,
I knew immediately why he reacted so visually to her, but
yeah.
I kept pulling, kept tugging on why, and then we finally got to, because she reminds me of you when you were sick, and I realized, oh, he was okay back then, but there's still memories. He's still unpacking some of it now, and so we talked through it, etc. But so I think it's just staying in tune with your kid and knowing, like, yeah, they're gonna be fine. They will be okay. But staying in tune with what they are seeing and reacting to and their behaviors, I think for me, that's what I'm learning. This is very recently. This is, a few months ago that we started watching that season. And so I'm realizing that I still have to stay in tune with him. And because I still have to go I still have to, first of all, he hears me talk about my job. So he hears the word cancer all the time. Like
Right.
he hears me talk about breast cancer when I had it. And now, like, because of work, for sure. So he is so sweet. But also, one thing that I love, and like, he's so proud of me. He'll tell people he's so proud of me. Like the other day, I went to pick him up from after school. And the after school teacher was like, where's your little brother or sister? Because all the kids have siblings. He's the only one that doesn't have a sibling. And I explained to him, because he's asked me that question, why can't I have siblings? And I said, you know what? Remember when mommy had cancer? The medicine also made, there's just I can't have any more babies. Not because I don't want to, not because I don't love you. I just can't. There's something some people can do, some things others can't. And he got it. He told his after school teacher, I don't have siblings because my mom had cancer. She felt terrible, but she came and later
Right.
told me. And he's like, and by the way, my mom's really famous. Like he just thinks like the world of me. He loves me, and so I think that's what I love, is that he's so proud of me, and he's so proud of my job, because he tells me she works for breast cancer, she works for cancer, she helps people, and I think that's what I take away. It's like he's just fine, even though there are some, like the sibling thing, the bald, like all of that still comes up. But at the end of the day, he's still okay. They're gonna be okay, because that's the biggest part, is that guilt. Like you can't get over that guilt. I still have a lot of guilt about the sibling thing, him not having a sibling, because it's one of my dreams, my dream, and I had to
Mm.
give that dream up. But like I know that he will ultimately be fine. And I would say, the only other thing with being a parent is, it actually helped me. Like you cannot wallow. Like you cannot go too dark. You still have to show up for your kids. So not that it makes it easier, but you cannot fall apart. And to some degree, it actually forces you to keep it together. And so for that, I'm grateful. Like I'm actually grateful to have had a child, because I had to be okay.
How much do you think his resilience also comes from your husband? We
Mm.
don't like to give men credit for anything on this podcast, but there are some great husbands out there, my husband included. Um, and that can really make or break a situation like
Mhm.
this. So,
Mhm.
how do you think your relationship with your husband changed, and how did he step up to the plate in ways that you might not have thought he would?
Yeah. Well, my husband, his nature is to be a caretaker. Like he is very much a caretaker, a lot more than I am. I am not, like, not my natural self. It's not to be a caretaker, but he certainly is. So he, like, for sure, when we were first diagnosed, one of the beautiful things about a diagnosis is just how all the petty grievances that you have with your partner, like putting the dishes away or this or whatever, the little things like right away instantly disappear, right? And you realize how much you love each other and you want to be there for each other. So that part I think is like just beautiful. It's really beautiful to and what you remember I was saying there's so many silver linings that cancer gave me, and that was such a silver lining is that awareness of how trivial things don't matter and that moment when clarity is crystal. And so for us, that happened a lot, like in the beginning of my diagnosis, the whole part through active treatment, certainly. But then time happens, right? Time happens. I will keep moving on, and then you start falling back into old habits, and not just old habits, but also, you're a new person, right? Like as someone diagnosed, you're building on the rubble of your past self, and it's up to you how you rebuild. But your partner who was just also experienced this trauma, they also fundamentally are different, but different from how you're different. So it's like this finding each other again, I think is rocky. And I don't know that people really talk about the fact that it's a roller coaster. So relationships are not a one note, it's complex and it's deep, and the trajectory of the good times and the bad, they're still going up and down post diagnosis. It doesn't all just like cure every problem that you've ever had,
Yeah.
even if it does temporarily, but it does make things easier to return to each other. So I will say, I think that it certainly post diagnosis, post treatment, if you have HR positive breast cancer like myself, I'm on some serious hardcore drugs that certainly affect my mood, my behavior, all of that. And so trying to reacquaint ourselves with each other is, not necessarily easy because you can't let go of, we've been together 18 years, of preconceived notions of who we were. So it's good and bad. So that's what I'll say about relationships, which is very complicated, which is that there can be really, really close, tight-knit times, and there could be times where you've never been farther apart. But finding your way back to each other is a choice, an active choice that each couple on their own has to make. And, there's this statistic that female cancer patients are actually 6 times more likely to get divorced than male cancer patients. I think part of that has to do with life is too short. I'm not going to put up with X, Y, and Z. And so maybe some patients just move on with their lives and cut ties. But also, I think a lot of it has to do with what I just mentioned. It's that like rediscovering each other and wanting to make it work from both sides. So I will say though, my son would never know any of that, right? And so that's the beautiful part is he's learning how to react based on how his dad is reacting as well. And so his dad's reaction to my diagnosis certainly modeled for him that she's going to be okay. And he knew that I was
Yeah.
going to be okay because his dad made him feel that way too.
I think people probably don't really discuss this very much. The patient is the focus, right? And you are the one with the immediate trauma, but your partner does change and have their own trauma too. And there's not really a lot of space for them to have a boo hoo. There's not a lot of space for them to feel entitled to sadness or feelings because you're the one that this is happening to. And I really loved what you said about you're going through this sort of rebirth for yourself and having to find each other again. And I always think about this with couples that have been together for a really long time. Like they get together at 18 and then they live these long lives together. And a lot of people think, oh, they just signed up and they didn't quit. But I think so much of it is being the flexible person to fall in love with your partner again and again and realizing that there are going to be these times where maybe their expectation of who you were going to be or what your life was going to be like together isn't it, but deciding together, okay, this isn't what we expected. It's not what I dreamed of. You mourn the loss of that vision, but you find each other where you're at. Do you think there was any particular moment where you said, okay, I know there's no real after cancer, but was there a period where you both were kind of like getting back into the same habits? Maybe you're bickering and little things are creeping up again, and like the big cancer word is not in the forefront, so it's not softening the day to day, where you guys just both had to say, like, okay, not this again.
Mhm. Oh, absolutely. I actually love what you just said, which is that choose that you have to choose and decide to fall in love over and over again. Because, right, like no anybody, whatever you've been through, whether you've been through a trauma or not, we all experience things in life that change you, fundamentally change who you are. That's what growth is. So I loved that you said that because it is very much exactly that. And certainly I think once you're done with active treatment and you're done with your surgeries and all of that, for me it was, we'd had no time to develop a routine in this new, like we just moved in. So post diagnosis, we had developed routines in this new home based on my cancer. It took a while. It took a lot of that fighting and bickering to realize, oh, this shouldn't be the routine without a diagnosis, right? Like we need to realize it took us a while to open our eyes to the realities of like, oh right, we have a new life, period. Not just a diagnosis, but like we actually have a new life in a new house with a kid who's growing up and going to school. And so all of this stuff we realized, but it does take that choice certainly. And I think for us it was certainly it's that it truly was after active treatment. Like once we got back into a routine, and the other nuance for us is, and for me especially, is that for me cancer is still like a daily reminder because I have to take my pills every single morning. So every morning I have to take meds. I'm reminded of it. Every month I have to go in to get my Lupron shot. So I have it. It's constant. It's still like a constant part of my life. But it's not that way for him. He's not watching me take my medicine every morning. He's not going to the hospital with me every month. So it has disappeared from his immediate
Yeah.
view, right? But it's still very much a part of my life. So sometimes I'll be like, oh, don't, like, I don't, the frustration for me is when I feel like I'm still a patient, but to him, I'm not. I'm just back to my normal self. So I think that's where there's that rub as well. There's that tension that gets created, but we're figuring it out. And I will say, like, I think it's important to talk about. One of the reasons, like, it's hard to be so honest about your personal relationship, but I think there's this misperception for people that, things should be your partner should be perfect
Yeah.
because people have such a point of view that you're the patient and people should only want to be there for you and should only want to be taking care of you. But like that, it's not always going to be perfect, right? Like relationships are not going to all be perfect just because you have cancer.
And I think you got to be honest even about yourself if you were in the situation too. And I think about this all the time because I notice, like, for my dad to have to be the caretaker, and like I'm not a natural caretaker like you talked about. It's just it's not really in my DNA. I care for my kids, but I don't have the caretaker gene. And my God, would I get sympathy fatigue? I know myself, and I probably would hit a wall where you don't have any more to just altruistically give, because you also need something. So, if you can frame it that way, obviously it's frustrating because you, as the patient, you are the one who's living it and experiencing it and dealing with the traumas and the everyday medical experiences of being somebody who had cancer, who has cancer, as this lifelong arc. But yeah, I think if you can try to zoom out and look at it from at like a human perspective, that probably gives you.
What you just said, sympathy fatigue. Like, absolutely, of course. That makes so much sense. I think you hit the nail on the head there. And, one of the first things I'll tell people, because a lot of times some people will reach out to me and say, oh, my friend was just diagnosed. Like, any suggestions? What should I do for them? One of the first things I say is take care of the partner. Like, everyone else is taking
Mm,
care of the patient. Find out what their partner needs because that person, no one's asking them like what do you
yeah.
need, people are asking the patient. And so yes, like their work is invisible but also should be valued, but you'll have to take care of that person too, because otherwise the
Yeah.
consequences of that will also be felt afterwards in the aftermath.
Do you think you can pinpoint a moment where you went from Sadia, the person who has cancer, to being yourself again? And not maybe from how you feel, but how you were perceived? And has that impacted friendships? Because I feel like there's got to be a time where friends see you as this vulnerable thing. And then do they ever see you on the side, the
Mm.
outside of that? Or is it always sort of a different shift in the friendship?
That is such a good question. I think we're still figuring that out, and I very strategically play the cancer card unabashedly, unashamedly. Because, for example, I instituted some things post cancer, specifically also for my relationships, because I realized post cancer that the only real value we have in our lives are our relationships and the people around us that we love. And so I wanted to help nurture those relationships that are most meaningful to me. And that includes some of my closest friendships. So we have these monthly brunches because we all have families and kids. And so it's impossible to find time to see each other. Monthly dates, and then an annual trip, a girls' trip just for
I
us
love
to
that.
nurture ourselves, right? And very recently, just this past weekend, I just came back from that trip, and we almost didn't do it, and I almost gave up because it's 4 years in, and they're starting to get like, things, you get distracted, life happens, but I reminded them all, I had cancer. We are going on this trip. Like, we are not missing this. So I think so in one hand, sometimes I don't let them forget it because it's important to remind people that we have to. I know sometimes in the beginning, yes, we want to tie ourselves closer together, but don't let time ruin that part. But on the other hand, as far as your question, like when did you go from Sadia the patient back to Sadia the normal? I don't know that I fully have. I don't know that I fully have. I think that part of that is a consequence of my job, again, because I'm constantly talking about it. So I can't confidently say that I truly have. And I think even in my family, with my sisters and my parents, like I think I'm still in their head. They see me and there's a little asterisk by my name.
Hmm.
They'll see me and there's like a little invisible asterisk next to my head where they still think of me as a cancer patient. Which is on, it's really, that I can't help. Like that's on them to figure out how to cope with, but I don't know, I'm still working on it, I guess.
Yeah, I feel like there's got to be a period of people treating you with kid gloves. And
Mhm.
while that might actually be nice, like
Mhm.
because you do need the help, you like the soft handling and you want people around, I'm sure there's a moment where it's like, God, like, can you just stop acting like I'm contagious or something? Like
Mhm.
I have this thing that, is like stuck to me. Like you're just a person too.
Yeah, I will say I think uh one example where that gets sad is sometimes my friends don't want to burden me with their worries, and so they won't tell
Mm-hmm.
me things. But that's what intimacy is. Intimacy is sharing each other's burdens. And so when you don't share your burdens with me, we lose intimacy and trust. And so, and that goes for, and I'm talking real specifically about friendship. So to me, yeah, sometimes I do have to say, don't look at me as a patient. I'm still your friend. I'm still just that person that loves you and adores you, and I want to know what's going on in your life. So yeah, I think that's a complicated question, but a very good one.
And this reminds me of, something my mom had told me. She was diagnosed at the same time that her mom was going through treatment. And she
Mm,
didn't tell her mom or anybody in her family that she had cancer, literally until she had to have her breast removed and go through treatment. And I can't even imagine what it's like to feel like you had to keep it a secret. And my mom did it again the second time. Like she kept it a secret as long as possible. Like didn't tell me, didn't tell friends, like got a great wig, tried, didn't even tell her sister. And I mean, I think that was a really tough point for them later where she's like, "You couldn't tell me? I'm your sister." But I can understand that idea of not wanting to burden people with your problems. But I think if there's anything like I've learned as I've gotten older, people want to help and like burden them. You have cancer, you have XYZ trauma going on. It's okay to have people shoulder a little bit of it for you. Like
Mhm,
that is intimacy, like you said, that is friendship.
mhm, exactly.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story and being so candid. I feel like I've learned so much, and I learn something new every time I hear your story and getting to talk to you more intimately about it now. We always ask guests at the end of the podcast, what's something you learned too late?
One thing I learned too late, and this, I was thinking about this because I know this about your podcast. It's not cancer related, but it is, for me, it's related to grief because I learned too late. I had a cousin who was a cousin is such a flimsy word for the fact that she was my sister and one of my best friends, and she had a she had a congenital heart disease, and she died at 33. We grew up together, and what I learned too late was understanding her experience as someone with a chronic illness. And only after she passed and then I was diagnosed with cancer did I have any inkling of what her life was like to be chronically ill, and not just chronically ill, but to have an illness that threatened her life. So I learned too late that you have to show up for the people that you love, because I took her for granted. I never took her illness seriously because we grew up with it. It just was a part of our lives from when we were babies, since when we were kids. The simplest way for me to put it, what I learned too late, was to understand other people's burdens, particularly people who are chronically ill. And I wish I could have learned that earlier while she was still here. Like, I wish I learned what it is to have that empathy for her, and I wish I could have given that to her while she was still here.
That's beautiful. If there's one piece of advice that you could give to someone who's recently diagnosed or was in the same shoes as you, feeling like they're worried about something and they're being dismissed at the doctor, what advice would you give for somebody in that position?
The only thing that you will regret when it comes to your health is not doing enough. So you would rather push and do more and push until you get the answers that you not just deserve, but answer all of your questions. So younger patients, especially younger breast cancer patients, at least 70% of them feel dismissed by their doctors. And that's number one. No, you're not alone. You're not alone. This is a problem. This is a really big problem. And it's okay to push for answers and to keep pushing for answers until you feel good about the ones that you get, until you feel like your questions have been answered. I encourage you, like, you don't want to live with that regret. So as long as you feel like I've done everything I can, you will feel good about it later, no matter the outcome.
Well, thank you so much. You are such an inspiration. And I know there are going to be a lot of people who learn from you listening to this episode. And hopefully they do their monthly self breast exam, they get in for those early screenings, they learn their risk. So thank you so
Mhm.
much.
Of course. Thanks, Alan.